Good morning and welcome back to the free educational webinar series brought to you by WeatherWorks. My name is Michael Prianti, Director of Social Marketing and a lead meteorologist here at WeatherWorks. And we're joined with lead meteorologist Brad Miller. We'll be talking about certain weather hazards that you might encounter during the summertime months that you might need to be aware of, especially if you want to keep yourself and your business safe. And without further ado, Brad, the floor is all yours.
Hey, thank you, Mike. Of course, always enjoy being a part of the webinar series here at WeatherWorks. And, again, going back to myself, I've been with WeatherWorks now for about 7 years. 2015, I started out here at the company. And before that, I was actually on television for about 10 to 12 years at the CBS affiliate in Charleston, South Carolina. Had a good time, of course, doing the weather on television. My background, I have an education and Bachelor of Science in Meteorology from Millersville University. And also here at WeatherWorks, I am one of the podcast managers, along with Michael Priante right there and Mike Mahalik. We host the podcast called The Weather Lounge. So check that out, of course, on all your podcast platforms. We'll talk a little bit more about our social media aspect here in a few minutes. Let's move on to our webinar series today. And again, that includes safety hazards of the summer season. And here's what we are going to cover here in the next half hour to 40 minutes or so. Heat and severe weather, that's a big one. Lightning safety and awareness, different types of flooding. And although we do live here in the Northeast, we can never forget about hurricane preparedness because we've already kind of dealt with that here the last few years. So we'll also touch on that a little bit going forward. First and foremost, let's get to the heat, because that, of course, is one of the biggest things we deal with, again, not only here in the Northeast, but a good portion of the U.S. When, of course, we get into late spring and summertime. The heat, when it's accompanied with the humidity, it can feel even warmer. And what we calculate from that point is called the dew point. Yeah, we use the relative humidity as a percentage to kind of get an idea of how much moisture is in the air, but a better way to deal with it in the summertime is using the dew point. And basically, you'll see that on TV, or you'll see it in the app or things like that. And basically, if a dew point's 60 degrees or higher, it indicates kind of a humid air mass. So it's muggy. You kind of feel it. It's not too crazy yet, but once that dew point gets to 65 plus, things start to get a little bit more uncomfortable. You kind of go outside and you're sticking a little bit, and ooh, it's kind of humid out here. But when you get past 70 degrees in that dew point, that's when it turns oppressive, and you really don't want to be outside anymore. You go outside and you start sweating immediately, and maybe you're out working or even doing like a sporting event, something like that. After just a little bit of time, you don't want to be out there anymore. And and with that though comes some health concerns. The heat index. Now that's when we take a combination of the temperature and the dew point, and that table you see on the right, and hopefully you can see it good enough there. But really, the yellow numbers, when you get that temperature and the dew point, in the 80s to even some low or mid 80s, the humidity isn't really that bad yet if that dew point again is 65 or less. But if you start to get into those mid 90s, and if you take, for example, let's say 96 degrees on a July afternoon and the dew point's at 70, that gets you to a heat index of about 101, or I should say 104 degrees. That's what it feels like on the body. So let's talk some of the places in northeastern New Jersey or down towards Washington, D.C., mid-July, 2 p.m., temperatures, 98 degrees, and that dew point's like 72. Now you're starting to get into that oppressive part, and you start to feel like it's 110, 111 degrees. That's when the heat advisory is usually issued as well by the National Weather Service. And you need to take precaution for that. You don't want to be outside too long when you get into that kind of heat and humidity. You're working outside, or you're mowing lawns, or you're doing certain things that you just don't want to be outside much longer, because it's just getting to the point where it's uncomfortable. Now, one thing to remember, heat exhaustion. That's something when we start to have some heavy sweating, you start to get a little pale in the face. You start to get like muscle cramps, and you get tired pretty easily. Your pulse kind of goes up and down. You get dizzy. You can even have nausea or vomit. It's just, again, it's a sign that your body is not doing well in the heat. At that point, go inside, get into something cooler, drink some water, not very cold water either at the start, because that's a little more of a shock to the system, but you're still going to get some liquid into you and at least get your body temperature to come back down. The dangerous part of the heat is when you could have a heat stroke. Now that's pretty dangerous. That's when the sweating stops. You get very clammy. Your body basically is cramping up inside and out. The temperature in your body is actually 104 degrees or higher. So think about that. Think about when you have a fever and you're sick and you don't feel good at 101, 102. Now imagine your body temperature rises to like 104. You start getting confused, and basically at that point you need to just either get medical attention or go to a hospital, because your body's not doing very well. It's actually trying to shut down. So immediately get out of the heat then, and you got to take precaution and start to get your body cooled off. What do you do to stay safe in the heat? Of course, stay hydrated. Uh, don't want to drink a lot of coffee or Coca-Cola or Pepsi and caffeinated drinks and things like that. You want to drink as much water as you can, because that's what your body needs to stay cool. You want to wear loose fitting clothes, lightweight clothing. Take plenty of breaks if you can. Get into the air conditioning. Even if you're outside working and your car has air conditioning, go run the car for a little bit and get into the air, because again, even that will cool you down nicely. Also, never leave your pets, of course, your kids unattended in the car. A car can just turn hot very, very fast, and it doesn't take too long for that temperature inside of a car to get 110, 120, 130. And of course, that's very dangerous then for humans and pets alike. You could wear a wide brimmed hat. That'll keep some of the sun off of your forehead, but also, of course, put on sunscreen as much as you can. And also with the pets is a lot of folks like to go outside and take walks with their pets. And even if it's like 85 degrees out, you're thinking, oh, it's a pretty nice day. Humidity's not too bad, but that asphalt temperature could be a good 40 to 50 degrees higher than the actual air temperature, especially if the sun's been out for a while. Maybe if you go out in the morning, you're okay. But again, watch your pets, because they actually can burn the little pads on their paws, especially when you take dogs for a walk. So here's a good way to think about it: is if it's too hot for your bare hand or your bare feet, then it's really too hot for your dog to go out for a walk, and just might want to wait until the evening. All right, so that's the heat portion of this, of course. And next thing we want to talk about is severe weather awareness, because kind of goes hand in hand with the heat. You kind of have a result of the heat, you get severe weather. And really, it's the fuel for storms to develop. Your worst thunderstorms of the summer or spring usually happen after it's been a hot, humid kind of a pattern. Of course, you can get severe storms other ways too, but that's kind of like the fuel for these storms. As we get into summertime, you add in a cold front or other kind of temporary boundaries, a sea breeze or a backdoor cold front, things like that, and that'll also help to trigger a lot of these storms, and they can quickly turn severe. Microbursts are affiliated with strong to severe storms, straight line winds, and of course tornadoes, and then the one buzzword that we always talk about are derechos, and that's just a long line of thunderstorms that basically can cover 300, 400, 500 miles in 24 hours. It can start in the Midwest, make it all the way to the East Coast, and at the same time, it's producing 60, 70, 80 mile per hour winds the entire length of the derecho. So just something, if you want more stuff about that, you can actually go to our website. We have blogs and stuff about derechos and things like that. All right, let's talk about watches and warnings, hand in hand again with severe weather. And this is a question we actually get a lot. We've done countless videos on watches and warnings here at WeatherWorks, blogs, and once in a while we'll throw something out on Twitter and Facebook when there's a watch or a warning that's out there. So basically, a watch, a severe thunderstorm watch or tornado watch in this case, for a severe thunderstorm, atmospheric conditions are favorable for the development of severe thunderstorms. They must contain 1-inch diameter hail and or 58 mile per hour winds or greater. A tornado watch means that, again, atmospheric conditions are favorable for the development of severe thunderstorms capable of producing tornadoes. Now, a warning means conditions are occurring or they're imminent. So a severe thunderstorm warning, if you do see that kind of come across your app or on your phone or on television, it means that a severe thunderstorm has developed. And these all come from the National Weather Service, by the way, when they do issue these watches and warnings. And again, the thunderstorm would have to produce 1-inch diameter hail or greater, and that wind gust, 58 miles per hour or higher. So think about it: a 60-mile-per-hour wind gust, 1-inch hail. That's a pretty nasty storm. Of course, a tornado. You see a tornado warning come up, that means you need to take cover, because either a tornado has been sighted, or there's a radar signature that is conducive for one to develop. So a lot of times the tornado warnings are a lot more narrow, or a lot doesn't have as much coverage as a severe thunderstorm warning or watch in that case. But nothing to mess around with, that's for sure. Either severe thunderstorm warning or tornado warning, you want to get inside. And just a little bit of fun here with the watch versus warning. Our own Mike Priante put this together for us. He introduced me just a few minutes ago, and this is actually pretty cool. So let's get rid of the tornado watch or the severe thunderstorm watch. Let's talk about a taco watch. So what you see on the left side of your screen, you got ground beef, you got some tortilla shells there, you got lettuce, you got some avocado, you got some onions. Looking good, right? It's tasty. That's your taco watch. So all the ingredients, they're all there for you to make a taco. Okay. Now, there's times when we have all the ingredients in the atmosphere for severe weather, where it could be a tornado or a severe thunderstorm, but you need some kind of a trigger. You always need something to say to the atmosphere, okay, go. So if you just put all your ingredients out there on the counter, no one's going to make the taco, right? It's just going to sit there. So the taco warning, that happens when actually somebody comes in and makes the taco, but all the ingredients come together, they come together in the right way, and that's how you get your warnings, which is a severe thunderstorm warning or tornado warning. So it's just another way to kind of think of it more of a funny way. So watch, ingredients are there, not happening yet. Warning means the ingredients have come together and you're actually getting some kind of severe weather, or, unfortunately, maybe a tornado. Moving on to lightning, and this is another one that you have to be really respectful of in the summertime, especially if you are outside. And before we get to some of the safety aspects of it, it's called lightning, not lightening. And I'm not making fun of anyone, because I've done this before too, but countless times you'll see on Facebook or Twitter or any kind of social media platform out there, you'll see, oh, I have lightning, I see lightning in the distance, and they'll spell it T-E-N-N-I-N-G. Again, it's lightning, not lightening. You want to lighten something, of course, you go with a lighter color, things like that. But so let's talk about how far lightning can reach. Also, when thunder roars, you're going to head indoors. So these are a few of the things we're gonna chat about. And one way you can actually find out how far a storm is, you may be outside and you kind of see the skies darken, and you start to hear a little thunder in the distance, and you're thinking to yourself, well, is that storm coming this way? How far away is it? And if you can't see the lightning yet, it's probably not that, it's probably still pretty far away. However, if you start to see the lightning, so if you see the lightning and then you count until you hear the thunder, you divide that by 5, that'll tell you how many miles away the storm is. So for instance, if you're, well, hopefully you're not outside, maybe in your car, in your house, you see lightning, and then you count to 10, it means the storm is about 2 miles away. And of course, it's probably getting closer to you at that point. Obviously, if the lightning occurs and there's thunder right on top of that lightning, then usually that just means the storm is right on top of you, and hopefully you're at the peak of the storm and things will start to improve shortly. Some facts about lightning: it's hotter than the surface of the sun, and it can reach a temperature of 50,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So, that's just, you can't even fathom how hot that is. Nobody can. Heat lightning, let's talk about that real quick. So a lot of times at night in the middle of the summer, it's July 15th, and maybe it's like 8, 9 o'clock, and you see lightning out in the distance. And it was a hot day. It was like 90 degrees earlier in the afternoon. Oh, that's heat lightning. That's okay. It's not going to bother anyone. Well, true. It probably won't bother you. Be pretty far away. This happens during the daytime too. It's just that you can't see the lightning from a storm that may be 50, 60, 70 miles away, sometimes 100 miles away, because you can't hear the thunder. Light travels further than sound. So in the daytime, if there's a storm, if you're, let's say, in eastern Pennsylvania and there's a storm in Philadelphia, you're not going to know that there is one there, because you're not going to be able to hear the thunder. Sound won't travel that far. And you also can't see the lightning because it's daytime. Now, if it's night, though, you can actually see that storm. Again, maybe you're 60, 70 miles away. You can see the lightning from the storm, but you can't hear the thunder. So a lot of folks say, oh, it's heat lightning, but it's actually a real thunderstorm that's just too far away for you to hear the thunder. So it just sometimes gets a bad rap as a heat lightning that is because of a hot day. And a lot of times that's the case because you get storms into the evening after a hot day. Lightning can strike the same place twice. Don't matter where that last strike was. If it hit the top of the Empire State Building, it can do it again 5 minutes later, or 10 minutes later, or it can do it 8 times during a thunderstorm. It just doesn't matter. It can happen, and even along the ground level too. You can never say, "Oh, it struck right there, so I'm safe right there." It's not the truth. All right, now there's 5 ways that you can get struck by lightning. Our little guy here, this is actually one of my favorite little diagrams. The Weather Service actually supplies this kind of, I guess, way that you could see how lightning can affect you or impact you. And if you go on the Weather Service website for this, I don't mind giving out the Weather Service info on this stuff with safety with lightning and things like that. Just Google National Weather Service lightning safety, and this little guy here actually gets struck by lightning all these different ways. I don't want to make fun of somebody getting struck by lightning, but it's kind of comical to see this because, again, it's not real life, but at least it's a cartoon. But it does give you an idea of how you can get struck by lightning. Of course, number one is a direct strike. Unfortunately, the bolt of lightning actually just kind of hits you straight on. 2 is a side flash, side splash, it's called. So maybe the lightning actually hits a tree and you're close enough to the tree where you're kind of like a short circuit for lightning, and it can kind of get you even though you're that close. And that's why they say don't take shelter under trees during a thunderstorm. Number 3 is a ground current, and really what that is basically the lightning can strike a tree or something like that, and it travels through the root system right through the ground. And if you're close enough, again, you can get struck from the ground up or from the root system of a tree. And again, don't be near trees during a thunderstorm. The 4th one there is called conduction. And really what that is you can see the little guy there. If you look close enough, he's pretty far away from the tree. But what's happening here is the lightning striking the tree, and there's a wire fence there. So even though it strikes the tree and this guy here is standing, maybe 100, 200 yards away, it travels along that wire fence, okay? And it could, almost like just a conductor, and it goes right on in. And if you're near enough to that fence, it could actually, you can get struck that way too. And the 5th way is actually called a streamer. And this is something that I never really kind of knew much about until I kind of saw this. And really what it is, again, it could strike a tree, but at the same time, even though there's always a main bolt or a main strike, there's streamers that can come off, and they just kind of travel through the air, and you may be unlucky enough to be close enough to one of those streamers. And in this case, you can see the guys on the beach there, and the lightning strikes the palm tree, and once again, you could be 100, 200 yards away, and that little streamer can still kind of get you from the air. But again, something great to know about, and something to, if you want more information, go and check this out. We actually have a blog about this too on our WeatherWorks blog too. So if you want to go that route, you can go to our website and check that out, weatherworksinc.com. When thunder roars, another idea in safety is to go indoors. Of course, it's the safest place to be with any thunderstorm. If you're stuck outside, you don't want to go near hills, trees, poles, or any, again, fence rows. We just kind of covered that with all the different ways that you can get struck by lightning outside. Cars do offer protection. They will provide safety as lightning will go around the metal frame if it gets hit. And with the rubber tires, of course, it just kind of grounds itself then. While indoors, avoid any surface that may not be grounded. Pipes and plumbing, of course, you don't want to be taking a shower during a severe thunderstorm, things like that. Sinks, and obviously you don't want to be near any windows either, because lightning can travel through the glass. All right, moving on from lightning. What the hell is happening here? A little play on words, I know. Well, hail is another aspect of severe weather during the summertime, sometimes in the spring as well. And I guess the first thing I want to make clear is that hail is not the same as sleet. A lot of folks think that, and this is more common in the wintertime, that folks may be thinking they're seeing hail, but it's actually sleet, and vice versa in the summer. But sleet can only happen in the winter months or from a winter weather kind of a setup. You can't get sleet in the summer; it's just too warm. Because again, it's just kind of a partially melted snowflake that tries to refreeze before reaching the ground. So again, sleet can only happen in the winter. Hail, now, yeah, it can happen in the winter. You can get thunderstorms, of course, in the winter, but it's more of a common occurrence in the late spring and going into the summertime months because it's a actual part of a strong thunderstorm usually. I mean, a run-of-the-mill thunderstorm, you're just basically going to get heavy rain, lightning, thunder, and it kind of moves on in 10, 15 minutes. But in some of the bigger storms, of course, you can get the updrafts and the downdrafts, and some of these raindrops start to freeze and they go up and down, up and down, up and down. And each time it goes back up to the cloud, it gets another layer of water. And that's how you kind of see the hailstone and how many times it might have gone up and down. So that's kind of what drives the hailstone through the storm. Eventually, the hailstone becomes too heavy, it has too many layers of ice on it, and it has to fall to the ground because it's just the updraft isn't too strong to keep it aloft anymore, and it will reach the ground. Now, of course, hail, it ranges in size from a pea all the way up to grapefruit. Okay, well, we'll cover it real quick. A pea-sized hail, that's more of your run-of-the-mill storm. Maybe you get a stronger storm, that lasts a little bit longer, and it can produce some pea-sized hail. And usually it just kind of speckles the ground, or you hear it, and you can hear it on the mailbox or the car or your house. Like, oh, it's hailing out. It must be a pretty bad storm. Usually it is, it's a decent sized storm at that point. Then you start to get the penny size, and that's about 3/4 of an inch. And 1 inch, that is the threshold, again, like we said earlier, for severe thunderstorms. And that's about the size of a quarter. Now, as you keep on going up in size, obviously, you don't want to get hailstones that big. Golf ball size, hen egg size, tennis ball size, even baseball, softball size. Now, that's more of like an occurrence that would, you'd see in a storm in the Midwest or in the plains where they get some of these huge thunderstorms that could, be 50, 60,000 feet high. Here in the Northeast, we're probably more along the lines of quarter to maybe ping pong at times for a real severe thunderstorm. Once in a while, we'll hear of a bigger 2-inch diameter hail. It's a rare occurrence, but it does happen. But here again, we're just talking usually about quarter-sized hail, and but even that can do damage to a roof. It can leave dings and dents in cars and trucks. So think about a quarter-sized hail. You got some hail damage. It'll leave some marks in places. Now think about 2-inch hail, think about 3-inch hail, that's softball, baseball sized hail. Now we're getting to the sizes that not only will it just cause some dings and dents, it'll do some major property damage. It'll mess up your roof, it'll send hailstones through your roof. Aluminum siding, it'll just completely mess that up. Crops also, think about that, think about the crop damage sometimes that you hear about in the plains in the Midwest where you get some of these huge thunderstorms that produce some of these big hailstones. So, it is damaging. It's unfortunately it has caused fatalities. People can get hit by hailstones in the head, or it's not fun. I'm sure if you get hit by a 4-inch or 3 to 4-inch diameter hailstone. But it does happen, unfortunately, and you do need to take cover, obviously. The largest hail ever recorded in the United States occurred in Vivian, South Dakota, on July 23rd, 2010. Believe it or not, it measured 8 inches in diameter, and there's a picture of a ruler with that. So imagine that 8-inch hail. That's again, that'll do some major damage, obviously. All right, moving on from hail, we're going to talk about flooding, and the biggest takeaway from any kind of flooding is the old slogan, turn around, don't drown. You never want to drive through flooded roads. Plus, roads can be washed out. You just don't know how deep that water is. Just 6 inches of moving water can knock a person over. 1 foot of water can float away a car. Takes about 2 feet for a truck or SUV. So if you see, the roadway kind of disappear and you think, well, I've driven this road several times, but that water is rushing across that and it's 2 feet deep. If you try to do it, you're probably not going to be successful. Unfortunately, you don't want to try it. Just turn around, don't drown, don't get into trouble, because once that car stalls or that truck stalls, then you're at the mercy of whatever is flowing with you, and it can just, you can't get out then. You just kind of have to wait until it relents, but it's not a smart thing to try to drive through anything like that. Flash floods can occur very quickly. Urban areas are most prone. Usually when you get the rainfall rates of 1 to 3 inches per hour, that will get it done. And Ida comes to mind from here in the Northeast back in 2021. And we'll actually talk about Ida here in just a minute. But, those rainfall rates, they mean business. And that's usually what it does. If you get 2 inches of rain over a 12-hour period, or, a little bit more than that over a 24-hour period, most of the time everything's okay. It's when the rain rates are too fast to drain off, that's when we get into trouble, and that also again leads to flash floods. Let's talk about some of the flooding that can occur with really a thunderstorm or just downpours. This is called poor drainage, roadway flooding. On the left is more of a typical poor drainage setup. You can see a couple cars trying to go through the intersection. I guess it's still okay there. You can still see the drains. The water is kind of accumulating on the roadway, but you just got to be careful. And a lot of times, though, that drains off pretty quickly, and the drains are actually doing their job there, and it's probably the water is draining off faster than the water can fall. However, when you get into more significant poor drainage, you can see there on the right, I think that's Route 1 in Edison, New Jersey, a couple of years ago, and that's when the rain is falling too fast for the rain to actually exit or at least drain off. Maybe the storm sewer is already too full, or you've already had heavy rain last couple of days, or things like that, and everything's kind of not able to drain properly. Then it just keeps on accumulating, just like snow. And if you're stuck in traffic, things like that, that's where we get into big problems. You can see that car on the right looks like it's having issues. The water is almost up to the door there. And that's when you get up to the point also where a car could float away, could stall out, and then you have more issues. So it's again, significant poor drainage flooding. That's something when you actually probably have a flash flood warning in your area, and you need to just stay away from those places. Next is small stream and creek flooding. This happens also when we have downpours, a lot of rain in a short amount of time. More typical on your left, you can see it's kind of a farm area there, and the stream, looks like it just came over its banks there, and yeah, it's causing some issues, probably around around the immediate area, but outside of that, it'll peak, and then once the thunderstorm or the downpours move on, you should be able to kind of get back to normal in the next couple of hours. On the right is more significant flooding there. You can see from a creek or a stream. It's kind of undercutting the soil. It's wiped out that driveway, and that current right there probably is not smart to be in either. That could cause problems. So that's your more significant flooding from streams and creeks. And of course, the more downstream you go, the worse it gets, because the current not only is picking up faster, it's also having more water flowing into it. So these types of things, they happen. I'm sure where you live. If something occurs with these, Ellicott City is actually one thing that kind of pops into my mind, and they've flooded a couple times, unfortunately, in the last 5 to 10 years, and that riverbed, that whole area is just susceptible to some of the heavy rainfall. So that's kind of what we see, and it's nothing to mess around with. Not only can you get the poor drainage, but you can get, if you live near a stream or a creek, that can happen pretty quickly. And mentioning Ida too, let's go back to that. It's fresh on people's minds because, again, it happened last year, September 1st to 2nd, 2021. And just get an idea, you can see some of the rainfall totals there. Newark, New Jersey, over 8 inches. Hartford, Connecticut, over 5 inches. Philadelphia only had about 2 1/3, but there are a lot of the suburban areas got more than that. Allentown over 4 inches, Baltimore over 4 inches. So, and a lot of this occurred in a 4 to 6 hour period, and that's what did it. Again, it was the rainfall rates. It was a lot of rain in a short amount of time. New Brunswick, New Jersey, right there in central Jersey, almost 8 inches of rain. Hershey, Pennsylvania, over 8 inches out there towards Harrisburg. So, this kind of rainfall, it just doesn't drain off fast enough. It causes problems. And unfortunately, the one aspect of Ida was that, more people died from Ida here in the Northeast and when the actual hurricane made landfall along the Gulf Coast, again, because of the flooding here in the Northeast. So, hopefully we don't see anything like that this year. You just got to be prepared for that and make sure you do get to higher ground, or, take precaution if you know that something's going to start flooding And there's a look at just one of the many pictures that are out there. This is actually from one of our meteorologist at WeatherWorks. I think his mom took this photo in northern New Jersey, somewhere near Hoboken. And I mean, that just, you can just see that right there. I mean, the cars are, that one car in the middle, or actually the two cars up top there, are almost completely, taken over by the water there. And you can't drive in that. Those cars are submerged now. And being where they're at in northern New Jersey, I'm sure there's some salt water mixed in with that. So that's not good. And the flooding from Ida was historic, and it's going to be fresh on people's minds, unfortunately, for a long time. Let's talk about coastal flooding here a little bit too. Something that kind of gets more on the side of things when we hear about flooding and things like that. But folks along the beach and the shore, Jersey Shore, even down along Long Island and into the Long Island Sound, New England, coastal flooding is an issue there just as much as it is inland flooding. Persistent onshore winds worsened by several cycles of above normal high tide. So, sometimes you get a big nor'easter that may linger for 24 to 48 hours, and you'll have, 4 or 5 high tide cycles within that, and it's just constant. And we see that a lot actually in New England with the nor'easters. It can also happen, of course, along the Jersey Shore, and it's just the onshore winds. And we deal with this then in the summertime too, especially if we have a tropical system. You'll have a storm surge, which it'll push several feet of water onshore. So the storm surge is basically, where the water level is normally, and then it's pushed even more so inland as the storm kind of makes a close call or closest approach, or makes landfall for that matter. So again, that storm surge does a lot of damage, and you see that a lot, especially along the Gulf Coast states in Florida when they're dealing with big hurricanes down there. Significant beach erosion, back bay flooding, saltwater intrusion, that's all included in aspects of the coastal flooding. So it's something that unfortunately folks do have to deal with. And moving on now, speaking of hurricane preparedness, just kind of one slide on this one. And again, being in the Northeast, it's not an every year occurrence. We deal with a lot of times the remnants of tropical systems, and maybe not a direct impact. Of course, Sandy comes to mind. We'll talk about Sandy actually here in a second. But know your risk and have an evacuation plan or a route, just something that you would have an idea where to go if you were evacuated. Gather supplies, water, food, flashlight, medications, your first aid kit, pets. Bring cash too. A lot of times if you go somewhere and the power's out, credit card machines won't work. So hopefully they'll take cash and you can use that. So hopefully you can have that before you go if you do have to evacuate. And stay informed, keep up with the latest forecasts because they do change. Hurricane tracks are usually kind of set, but there are a lot of variances as we get closer to landfall, and may shift one way or the other. But the impact zone is usually pretty solid once we get close enough to landfall. And also have flood insurance, and I can attest to this because living in Charleston, South Carolina for several years. They have different flood zones down there, and actual places where you have to have flood insurance. They tell you can't live here unless you have flood insurance, and it may not be along the coast. We weren't right on the beach, and still because of tides, there's a lot of tidal locations down there that still get impacted, even a couple miles inland from the ocean, that can flood. And if you don't have flood insurance, then if your house has damage or anything from a flood, due to weather, the flood insurance will only cover that. Homeowners insurance will cover a pipe burst or something internal in the house. That's fine. But if your house gets flooded out, or your basement floods, or this occurs due to weather, then homeowners insurance will not cover that. It will only be covered by flood insurance. So again, if you do flood a lot or you're going to have issues, you need to get that flood insurance because it's definitely worth it. All right, how about our outlook for the tropics here from WeatherWorks? This upcoming season, 2022, we just started, of course, a couple of weeks ago on June 1st. It's going to be another active year. I think a lot of other forecasts that are out there, especially the big ones from Colorado State, NOAA, they're all expecting an active year, and so are we here at WeatherWorks. Our Expected total named storms this year, 15 to 19. Historical average is about 14, so that's above normal. 6 to 10 of those named storms becoming hurricanes, and 2 to 4 of those hurricanes becoming a major hurricane, and that means that's category 3 or higher. But regardless, whether or not you get a direct impact or like an Ida impact like we had last year here in the Northeast, it only takes one to make it a memorable year. So just keep that in mind. All right, the last thing we're going to cover is something that maybe some folks don't want to talk about anymore, but it's definitely worth sharing from time to time, especially as we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary. Hard to believe this October will be 10 years since Hurricane Sandy made landfall and impacted much of the East Coast. Going back to that, look at the wiggly track. Something that was odd about Sandy. I was actually in Charleston again at this time, and of course we were watching it very closely because it was coming up out of Cuba, going through the Bahamas, and it started to turn northwest towards the southeast coastline of the United States. But then it said, "No, I'm going to kind of go out to sea." And then it started to track northeast, and a lot of folks are saying, "Oh, it's parallel to the coast." But the European model said, no, this thing's going to turn inland, and it's going to kind of go anomalously. Oh boy, I can't say that word. Anyway, back to the northwest and make a landfall somewhere in the mid-Atlantic, and that's exactly what it did. And you could see the storm itself just came across South Jersey and impacted all the Delmarva, and of course New York City being on the north side of that had some major issues. The central pressure was 946 at landfall. That was the second lowest pressure of any storm to come ashore north of Cape Hatteras. And Philadelphia recorded a 953 millibar pressure. That broke their old record of 963. I mean, they crushed it from the superstorm of 1993. Once again, you can see some pictures there. The Battery Manhattan had a high tide of 13.88 feet. Kings Point was 14.38 feet above mean low tide. That's crazy. And then you can see Sandy Hook, well above normal on all their high tides. And you can see, I believe that was the Seaside Heights ride area there that was taken out by Sandy. And unfortunately, they rebuilt it, thankfully. But it's just, the devastation along the East Coast from Sandy was just unheard of, especially, coming from a track like that. Some of the peak wind gusts, Eaton's Park, New York, 96 miles per hour. Islip, actually where the Weather Service is located near Upton there in Long Island, 90 miles per hour. Just a few other ones there. You can see Allentown got the 81 mile per hour gust. Sussex up there in North Jersey, 75. So a lot of wind damage, obviously, from Sandy. Trees down everywhere. I remember my parents telling me, even where they lived in the Poconos, they had a lot of tree damage. And, we're talking almost 100 miles inland. And that didn't matter because Sandy's wrath was across a large area of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. Rainfall, yeah, it was there. Some areas got away with not as much. But, other areas got a lot of rain, over a foot of rain in Easton, Maryland. Wildwood, New Jersey got almost 12 inches of rain. Then it kind of tapered off as you moved inland, but still, rain wasn't the biggest aspect until you got down towards mid-Atlantic. But either way, it was just another part of Sandy that we had to deal with. And believe it or not, with Sandy, if you remember, or maybe you don't remember, it snowed. Yeah, they got snow out in the Appalachians of West Virginia and even portions of South Central Pennsylvania, all the way down to the mountains of North Carolina. And not unheard of when you get a nor'easter kind of a system, and we're getting into the fall months at that point, and there was enough cold air that was produced by Sandy to get snow to fall. And there were some impressive amounts. It was like 2 to 3 foot amounts in some of the highest elevations of the Appalachians. So that's just that was just crazy with Sandy to have snow falling with all that mess happening along the coast with all the winds and rain and the damage that was coming out. So that's about it, folks. I just want to thank you for joining us for this webinar. We are WeatherWorks, and you can follow us on social media. And also, of course, you can go to our website, weatherworksinc.com. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. Also, check out our YouTube channel. We have a lot of videos there, good stuff to see. And also, of course, check out our podcast called The Weather Lounge. We have a new episode every 2 weeks. And that's a lot of fun. Me, Mike Mahalik, and Mike Priante take care of the podcast. So again, feel free to drop by that. And if you have any questions, you can always send us an email. And I'm always at bradmiller@weatherworksinc.com. And again, thank you very much for joining us for this webinar. And I'm going to send it back to you, Mike Priante.
All right, Brad, thanks so much for that very informative presentation. And thanks everyone for joining in to our monthly webinar series. And of course, we do have a webinar every month or every other month. So make sure you check back to our social channels, especially LinkedIn. We'll be posting brand new webinars as they get scheduled out. So again, thanks for everyone for tuning in, and we'll hope to see you here next time.